Right now. Thank you.
We missed you the other day.
That's
you know, man.
Good evening.
I had to work. Yeah.
Good evening. Good evening.
No, I didn't ever say anything.
And welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the House of Delegates. Tonight we are hosting candidates for two local House races, both the 7th and the 12th House districts. My name is Beth Obenchain, and I'm tonight's moderator. To begin tonight's forum, please stand and join as Kristen, Zach, Jay, and Justin from Radford University lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Two of our candidates tonight are seeking election in the 7th House District, which comprises Christiansburg and parts of Blacksburg, Montgomery, and Pulaski counties, and all of Floyd County. They are Nick Rush and Michael Abraham. From the 12th House District, which includes much of Blacksburg and parts of Montgomery, Pulaski, and all of Radford and Giles County, we have James Harder and Joseph Yost. Mr. Rush and Mr. Yost are the incumbents. Tonight, you, our audience, will pose the questions to our candidates. We have helpers going through the audience, circulating index cards and collecting them, and we encourage you to submit your questions. Please write your question, hand them in, and they'll be screened for duplication and then handed to me to pose to the candidates. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer a question, and I will rotate the order in which the candidates are asked the questions. After all the candidates have responded, a candidate may ask for a 30-second rebuttal. Then at 8:20, at the end of our questions period, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. I would also like to thank the other sponsors for this event, the Montgomery County, Radford, Floyd County branch of the NAACP, the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, New River Valley Chapter, and the News Messenger. This forum is also being videotaped by the town and will be available on YouTube at www.lwvmcva.org. Might be easier to remember that. That's League of Women Voters Montgomery County VA.org. Then it'll also be replayed on Channel 2, the town's public access channel, and Channel 190, the county's channel. We also encourage you to check the League's 7th and 12th House District Voters Guides that I believe most of you have gotten tonight, and they'll also be available at the public libraries and on the League's website. We have several League volunteers working tonight. Carol Linker, Susie Austin, and Mary Lowe are our screeners for the questions, and our timers are Phyllis Albritton and Bobby Littlefield. I'd like to ask you please to hold your applause until the end of this forum, and also please now turn off your cell phones and any other mobile communications devices that are not permitted. Now, it's time to hear from our candidates. Mr. Abraham, Mr. Rush, Mr. Harder, and Mr. Yost. So, let's see, we have some questions here. The first question is, currently 400,000 Virginians could benefit from the expansion of Medicare in this state. Do you support this expansion of Medicare? And if not, why not? So I will start with Mr. Abraham.
Yes, I do support that. It is part of the Affordable Care Act. It will put money from the federal government back into the state. It is our money. We've paid it in, and we should get it back out again. It will be a tremendous benefit to our state through the additional jobs and economic development. It will also be a health issue. I think it's around $2 billion. It is money, again, that can boost our health system, make us a healthier state and provide jobs for our people, and I do support it.
Mr. Rush.
Thank you. Yeah, Medicaid has grown from about 5% of Virginia's budget to currently a little over 30%, and it's growing faster than revenues and faster than it starts squeezing out other parts of the budget. So I do not support Medicaid expansion at this time. We have applied for waiver from the federal government to modify our Medicaid system we have in Virginia, and I would not support the expansion at this time. Joseph and I were speaking to a group of New River Valley nurses. They were very concerned about the Medicaid expansion. Adding 400,000 people to the rolls currently without the infrastructure, personnel, the doctors, the nurses to take care of those could be a detriment to health care in Virginia, and I wouldn't support it.
Okay.
I would support the Medicaid expansion, and I really believe it's a wonderful opportunity for our state to accept $2 billion in healthcare funds over the next couple of years. This is an important thing that can expand not only our rolls of people who are eligible, but also expand the amount of people who are in the healthcare sector in our state. That projections show that this will increase the amount of people employed in the healthcare sector by 33,000 jobs. That's a real opportunity for our end of the state that's oftentimes struggled to bring in enough doctors to serve our county, to serve the New River Valley, and I think this is an important thing that the state needs to look at as a way to bring 400,000 new people onto our Medicaid rolls who are uninsured. I really look forward to working to implement this system and finding ways to smooth out the wrinkles as we proceed forward, but this is an opportunity and I'm looking forward to implementing it.
Thank you.
I have been supportive of looking at expanding Medicaid or other things like other states are doing. There was a great editorial in the Roanoke Times this morning that was called A Pragmatic Approach to Our Healthcare Problems, that looked at what was going on in Arkansas and Michigan and what they were doing with their Medicaid dollars. You know, as we move forward, it's something we definitely have to address. Nick is absolutely right. If we do make the leap towards expansion, even the hospital industry will tell you that we have to look at reforms, we have to look at savings, because it is eating up our budget. And without adequate reforms and savings in place, we're going to start competing for higher education, for K through 12, for public safety, for mental health services, and we cannot afford to do that at this point.
Thank you. The next question. I am a firm believer in the sanctity of life and that life begins at conception. How would you work to protect the rights of the unborn? And Mr. Rush, I'll begin with you.
Well, I believe, first of all, I'm thoughtfully pro-life. I have been since I started my public service 22 years ago. Virginia is currently took many safeguards to protect the sanctity of life. I stand by those votes, and I will continue to vote that way.
You know, women's rights and women's issues have been an important aspect of this campaign, and I think it's going to continue to be so. This is a sharp area of contrast between me and my opponent, and I feel like that I can be a strong advocate for women's rights in our legislature. My grandmother was fighting these battles in the 1980s and 90s, Joan Munberg, a former delegate from this area, and I think my opponent's record on these issues are our main point of contention for me and a reason that I got into this race. He supported things like getting rid of money for life-saving cancer screenings, doing things to force women to have transvaginal and transabdominal abortion requirements. These are legislation that is out of touch with our 12th district. We need to be thinking about ways that we can look to achieve more women's rights, and I would be someone who stands up for working for women in the legislature as a legislator in this next legislative session. And I think we have a real opportunity to have a strong voice for women in this race.
Finally, a chance to interject some facts. You know, as we, over the last 2 years, have worked in the General Assembly, you know, the threats or the issues that have been made about this campaign And so we have to have adequate safeguards in place to ensure that it's going to have 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 to ensure that it's going to happen in a manner that's safe and healthy for the individual that's going through that, because it is a hard decision to make.
Okay, Mr. Abraham.
What we're talking about here is the rights of the unborn in terms of abortion rights. And let's face it, everybody, abortions are awful. I mean, I've never had one personally. I don't have that equipment, but I understand, from everyone I've ever talked to who's had one, they're an awful thing. I think the part that we agree on is that we'd like to have women who don't want to be pregnant not get pregnant, okay? And let's be real clear about what Roe versus Wade is about. Roe versus Wade is not about whether a woman can have an abortion or not. It's about whether she can survive it. Okay, so the way that we stop women from getting pregnant who don't want to be pregnant, is through contraception and through sex education. And my opponent and his party are doing everything they can to shut down the very providers of those services. So let's view it from that standpoint, and let's try and prevent unwanted pregnancies from happening in the first place.
If I could
Yes.
have an additional 30 seconds. I think it's important to highlight that my opponent's calling this a safeguard, but there's nothing a safeguard about a transvaginal or a transabdominal abortion requirement. That is an invasive procedure. That is something that our state has taken drastic measures to invade women's privacy. A woman deserves to make her decisions between her and her doctor, and this is something that a politician has no place in interfering with.
Thank you.
I'll
Yes,
take 30
you also
seconds.
may have a
Yes.
30-second response.
You talk about that procedure being unnecessary. Then would you mind to tell me why the National Federation of Abortion Clinic Guidelines recommend the use of an ultrasound, 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 the use of an ultrasound prior to an abortion. It says specifically for the health and safety of the individual, and asks him why Planned Parenthood was doing it prior to us passing our law in Virginia as well.
Thank you. The next question. All of you say you want to create jobs. What is your personal experience in creating jobs, and how do you plan to use this if you are elected? And they ask especially to focus here on Southwest Virginia. So, Mr. Harder, you're next.
Absolutely. This is really a point that I've made a big part of our campaign, and we're looking forward to working to grow jobs in our area. My main experience working for Southwest Virginia's job creation is working with Congressman Rick Boucher's program Showcasing Southwest Virginia. This was a program that brought countless jobs to our area over his 28 years of service, and I was proud to be a part of that in working to grow our region, to attract new businesses to the New River Valley, and I'm excited to continue his tradition of working on jobs. That's why I've done things like saying that I would give first crack at state contracts to our local businesses. This helps grow the NRV and gives us an opportunity to keep our tax dollars here in our local economies rather than having those go to other states and other countries. And then I think there's also a real opportunity in investing in our education system. An investment in education is an investment in our jobs. Our university system is doing great things with the Corporate Research Center, and I continue to support those types of things and driving our local economy here in the NRV, and will be an advocate for that.
Thank you. Mr. Yost.
Over the last 2 years, I've had the privilege and opportunity to represent my home for my entire life. I've worked closely with Virginia Tech and Radford University because they are the job creators, training our entrepreneurs for tomorrow. One of the things that I'm probably one of the proudest about is our work with the Virginia Tech Carillion Research Center in Roanoke. They are designing and building some very, very neat healthcare-related research studies down there. And the neat thing about it is the researchers are in the one building doing their research, and they're in the next building creating jobs. They're taking what they learned there and they're commercializing it. And so that's what we need to move to us in the 21st century, and that's what we're looking for in this area.
Okay.
I think your question started off about what have I done specifically to create jobs. And I've run businesses and I have hired people. But I can tell you from my experience, rich people don't create jobs. You folks create jobs. Jobs are created by consumers. And when there's money flowing, people are buying things, and that's when you hire people. We hire people as a last resort, all right, only when we absolutely needed them. And what keeps the economy moving forward is the circulation of money in the system. And so this term of this whole sense about job creators, I think we need to revisit it. What would I do specifically? Our opposition party always talks about job creators being the millionaires, and they invest in millionaires. I'd like to invest in us, and let's invest in education. Let's get people to take the jobs that are out there that they're not prepared for. Let's work on top quality infrastructure. And again, education, it's all about that. There are jobs out there that people could fill if they had the schooling.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe Michael's right. The question is, what have you done about job creation? And job creation has been the number one thing I've worked on for the last 22 years since getting elected to the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors at the age of 23. I've been privileged to go to two grand openings for ribbon cuttings for new corporations going to locate here in the New River Valley. Both were at industrial parks that were started when I was on the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors. Fallen Branch Industrial Park and Commerce Park in Dublin. I was the first member appointed from the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors to serve on Virginia's first economic development, which started the Commerce Park. When I left the Board of Supervisors as chairman, I decided not to run for re-election. A couple years after I left the Board of Supervisors, I was bipartisanly supported to represent Montgomery County on the New River Valley Economic Development Alliance. Over the last 2 years, since the New River Valley has had over $250 million investment and 1,000 jobs created. I appreciate my record on this.
Thank you.
Can I say something about that?
Yes, you may have a 30-second rebuttal.
I want to commend my opponent for his efforts there, but it's not just about industrial parks. Just having a place to place these businesses isn't enough, and we need to get people here educated for these jobs so that they can advance themselves. And I believe in a bottom-up economy that is sustainable and resilient and will stay here on the long term.
Yeah, if I may, that's why Virginia is ranked #1 in the nation for business climate. We've done a good job here in Virginia. That's why, as I just mentioned, the New River Valley over the last 2 years has had a $250 million investment and created 1,000 jobs. My opponent on September 4th mentioned that we should return to the productive tax rates of the 60s. He included those tax rates up to 90% on individuals and 55% on businesses. That would be terrible for Virginia business, and you would see companies not choosing to locate in Virginia and probably choosing to leave.
Thank you. The next question: what is your position regarding guns in K-12 schools and also background checks for gun owners? Mr. Yost, I think we're starting with you. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I've been pretty clear on where I stand on these issues. I've been open to looking at an across-the-board approach. Following the shootings in Connecticut back in December, the governor appointed me to the school task force for school and campus safety, where we were able to work on a regular basis up until the end of September during our final meeting on these issues. And there's more than just guns on these issues. There's mental health concerns, looking at other things across the board. Doing just one thing is not going to fix the problem.
Okay. Michael?
I also believe that my beliefs fit in very closely with what the nation was trying to get past after the Newtown massacre. Universal background checks, limited capacity magazines, and of course increased emphasis on mental health. I don't believe that it's a good idea that we should arm our secondary school teachers, our kindergarten teachers, or our kindergarten students. or elementary school students. I believe that the mental health is a big part of this picture, and I think the opposition party has done what it can to defund quite a bit of mental health activity. But I think that our gun violence is a national disgrace, and that nobody should be complacent when it comes to terms with how we deal with this issue. And again, I agree that there are many, many solutions, but I think that we need to get started to work these solutions.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Michael that the mental health component is very, very important in stopping these tragedies. Virginia has actually led the way since the tragedy here at Virginia Tech in background checks, and we've been constantly rated as one of the best background checks, stopping the most mentally ill people or criminals from purchasing firearms. This is one of the issues that me and my opponent differ greatly. He wrote just this year an editorial entitled, "Yes, the government should take your guns." He's called for the confiscation of private firearms, and he said that there's no reason to own a handgun outside of a pistol range. And I can think of a lot of my constituents that would disagree with those positions. I was endorsed by the NRA, and my opponent was labeled a enemy of gun rights here in the state.
This is another area of sharp contrast between me and my opponent. He says that he's being pretty clear about his record on guns being in our K-12 schools, but in 2011, he filled out the Virginia Citizens Defense League survey and said that he supported having people allowed to have guns in our schools. I think that that's the wrong policy for our communities, and it doesn't safeguard our schools. We need to have our schools be gun-free. We've seen horrible attacks here over the past couple of years, certainly one that we felt here in our own community. And I think it's important that not only should his record be clear on this, that what he tells an organization and what he tells people is a different thing. And I'm someone that's going to be standing for our schools and working for their security and not allowing guns to be in them.
Thank you.
I'll take 30 seconds on that.
Okay, sure.
I think if you would ask probably any member of the VCDL, and I think there's a few standing in the back, right back there, they would tell you that my views differ with them, whether you're talking about campus carry or carry in our public schools. My mom works in a public school every day, and I'm talking into it as much as I can, ma'am. Thank you. She works in a school every day. She's the one who probably taught me as a kid how to shoot a gun, and I would trust her more than anybody else with a gun. I've watched her shoot snakes out of trees, but I know she wouldn't be comfortable carrying a gun in school every day.
Up to 30.
Yes.
I believe that it's important for our local law enforcement to be the people who are having the guns and protecting our communities, and I don't think that arming teachers is a way to protect our school systems. And the point is not whether or not an organization is unhappy with you or not. It's a matter that you've said to an organization that you believe that our schools should be allowed to have guns, and then you tell people that they won't, that you believe that our schools should be given security. And that's just it's not a record that I'll have. I'm ready to step up for our school security.
Beth?
Thank you. Yes,
rebuttal?
You may also
okay.
have 30 seconds.
I just want to mention that the article that my opponent referenced, I did indeed write. However, the Roanoke Times assigns their own titles. The title, "Yes, the Government Should Take Your Gun Away," in retrospect, was a bit needlessly inflammatory. So if you read the article, you'll see that wasn't quite the point of it. The state legislature imposed a law years ago that one gun a month was enough. The recent legislature overcame that or voided that law, that somehow 120 guns in 10 years isn't enough. I think that's sort of more than enough, and if my opponent has endorsement from the NRA, that's good for him, because I don't want one from those folks.
Yes, you may have 30 seconds. Please, hold your applause. Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Rush.
This is not the first time that my opponent has said that the Roanoke Times entitled his editorial. But the simple fact of the matter is, on his own website, he self-entitled it, "Yes, the Government Should Take Your Guns." He did that before he ran for the House of Delegates, and after he ran, he changed the title. So he had the ability to change the title beforehand or to self-title it a different way. But he didn't. He chose to keep the Roanoke Times title, yes, the government should take your guns, and then he then changed it after he announced his candidacy for the House of Delegates.
Thank you. The next question, and this will be starting, I believe, again with Mr. Abraham. What will be your legislative priorities in the 2014 session?
My first priority is I've introduced a plan called Pay It Forward Virginia, which is an educational tuition plan. I actually have a nice little graphic here that goes with this. And American students are cumulatively $1 trillion in debt coming out of college. And we need to find a way to help our kids get through college without this crushing weight of debt. And so this is a system that is a voluntary system, obviously. It will need to be phased in because it does require some seed money. And it will allow a student to go to college with the promise of paying back to the state during their working career at a preset percentage. And so if a student has a good year, they pay back more. If they have less of a good year, they pay back less. And it keeps students from being needlessly underwater with their loans, allows them to take that money and invest it in their lives, invest it in their homes and their cars, and invest it in entrepreneurship. And I think it's a really good idea, and we should look into it.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Rush.
You know, my focus is going to be, as it has been for the last 22 years, focusing on jobs, things that improve middle-class families' lives. But the very first bill I'm going to propose, and if I'm lucky enough to be reelected, is to keep the Southwest Virginia Training Center open. Now, a lot of y'all may not know what the Southwest Virginia Training Center is. It's a state-run facility. It's a home for severely mentally challenged adults and severely handicapped adults. You know, after touring that facility, after seeing the impact that facility has had on these families' lives, I made a commitment to the hundreds of residents and their family members that I would do everything I can to keep that center open. And that will be the first bill that I put in. I'll always maintain my focus on middle-class families and jobs, but the very first bill I will put in is to protect those families.
Thank you.
My first legislative priority would be something I've already mentioned. It's my 3-point jobs plan to helping grow our New River Valley and doing things to attract jobs to this area. My experience with Congressman Rick Boucher was bringing jobs to our area, and I think we've got a great opportunity with our universities to do that. I've already said that I'd give state contracts first crack to our local businesses. Beyond that, I think it's important we invest in our schools. Investing in our education system is the best way to grow our local economies. I'm a graduate of New River Community College, and I was so glad to be next to other students who were going on to four-year institutions, but I was there in class with people who'd been laid off from the Volvo plant, people who were getting new skills in new sectors, specifically a friend who was working in the in the environmental retrofitting of houses, and I think we've got a great opportunity in New River Community College, our universities, through things like the Corporate Research Center to drive our local economy, and I'm going to be working really hard to make sure that our universities and our schools are thriving to grow our jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Yost.
My intention is to continue work on a legislative proposal that I had in the 2013 session that dealt with statewide health insurance plan for school divisions. This was something that has been pushed by various education groups across the Commonwealth for the last 10 years. A JLARC study in 2011 showed that if we allowed school divisions the ability to opt into the state employee health insurance plan, particularly for rural and smaller school divisions, you could save upwards to $60 to $70 million a year. And that's real money for areas like Montgomery County and Giles and Floyd and Radford. And once you save that money, then you can reallocate that money and put it back into the classroom. The biggest cost and expense that school divisions have are administering and procuring their health insurance plans every year, and so we'll continue to push that.
Okay.
I would love 30 seconds. I think that that program is wonderful, and I think it's a real opportunity for our schools to find a better way to getting our educators a better health care plan and better benefits. But I would ask Delegate Yost why he feels like after having a supermajority in the House of Delegates, a friendly Senate, a friendly governor, a friendly Attorney General, and a friendly Lieutenant Governor, why you feel like you can now deliver on this when you were unable to in your first 2 years.
Yes.
I'll take that.
Yes.
This first year was something that we know it was an uphill battle. We pushed it hard. For the first time ever, we were able to get money into both budgets for the Senate and the House into the final conference report that allowed for a study to take place. Everybody pretty much agrees that the study will come back positive. It's due back any day now. And once it comes back, we feel like we'll be able to push forward. The question that I would ask Mr. Harder is for him to explain how he's going to allow state companies the first crack at Virginia contracts and getting past the Commerce Clause in the U.S. Constitution.
Thank you. The next question, I'm putting two of them together, but that focus on roads. One of our audience members wrote, the Route 576 bridge in Virginia has been found to be structurally deficient. What do you think is the role of state government in correcting this serious problem? And another questioner wrote, did you support Governor McDonald's transportation bill? And if not, what bill are you supporting to deal with Virginia's road mess? And so, Mr. Yost, that...
Mr. Rush?
Rush.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I'm sorry.
I wish I lived
Yes,
25. That was 20 years ago, man. Well, I believe that's the Peak Creek Bridge, and you know, we've looked into that, and the state is doing a structural study on that, and the McDonald tax plan did not meet those thresholds for me. I did support Steve Newman's, a senator from Lynchburg's plan. It was about a $300 million plan. It was revenue neutral in the first couple of years to allow us to get out of this economic recession, and that money would have been used for transportation.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Harder.
I, along with Delegate Rush, actually agree that I don't think that our transportation package did enough for our community. I think, but to answer the question specifically, I think it's important that we take on the infrastructure projects that our state needs. However, I felt like that the budget that my opponent supported for transportation this past year didn't do enough for the New River Valley. I think first and foremost, we had an opportunity that was missed. Rail is going to Roanoke. However, it's not coming into Blacksburg. We need someone who's ready to fight to work towards having rail going from Northern Virginia to Blacksburg, and I'm going to be working hard to make sure that we put that in place. It's a real opportunity for our state to have that, and I think it's sad that it wasn't in this package, and I think it shows the leadership that John Edwards had in bringing that to Roanoke. Secondly, I think the transportation package's inclusion of the hybrid tax is exact opposite of the type of policies that we need in our state. We need to be encouraging people to make environmental decisions in their private lives. And I think when you're talking about taxing a hybrid vehicle at a higher rate, it's nonsensical to do that kind of thing. We need to be encouraging people to take those kinds of things on.
Thank you. Mr. Yost.
I was a proud supporter of the governor's transportation plan. It's not a perfect plan by any means, but it was a compromise. It was something where both parties came together and got the job done, something that we have not seen happen in Washington, D.C. in about 5 or 6 years probably. You know, it is not a perfect bill. There are things that I don't like. I don't like a hybrid tax. I sent a letter to the governor saying so, and I'm going to be co-sponsoring a bill with Delegate Tom Russ to repeal that tax come 2014 session. But at the end of the day, it did add a lot to this area. If you look at VDOT spending now compared to last year, we're up $89 million. They were spending $8 million on repaving our roads now we're spending $29 million this year on repaving roads. But the key thing about that transportation package was, for the last, I don't know, at least 2 years that I've been there, they've introduced a bill to reapportion the CTB, the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And as a result of this transportation package, they're not going to introduce that bill. They're not going to try to stack that board with Northern Virginia delegates or Hampton Roads delegates. They're going to leave it alone. They're going to get off our back.
If I could have
Yes.
No.
Oh, excuse me.
We need to
Abraham.
yeah.
I'm getting excited there, sorry.
If you've read the paper, you've noticed that we made this a cornerstone of our candidacy. My opponents vote against this transportation bill. I would support, if I had been there, I would have supported the plan. Obviously, as we've all agreed, it was not a perfect plan. It was a bill that had something for everybody to hate, but it accomplished something that we needed to accomplish pretty desperately. You know, again, the hybrid vehicle issue was something that we should never have put it in the first place. But I find it irresponsible that our bridges are structurally deficient, chunks of concrete are falling on people's heads, and my opponent says that he puts people in front of politics. It sure seems as though the people took second place to the political concerns in that particular situation.
I think he asked for a rebuttal first, and then
Jumped the gun a little there.
Mr. Rush. Go ahead.
Really what I was going to say is that I think it's important to note that you say that you wrote a letter to the governor saying that you didn't like the hybrid tax, but your vote counts. The things that you say to organizations count. And it's important, you can't just go back and say that I wrote a letter to the governor. You supported the hybrid tax, and it's out of touch with what our district needs, it's out of touch with what our state needs, and it's out of touch with what the beautiful environment and beautiful end of the state that we have here. And I think your record speaks for itself.
Mr. Rush.
Thank you.
Rebuttal.
You know, when I was earlier speaking, and when I look at tax policy, whether it's efficient, whether it's efficiently collected, this tax plan has taxes collected at the local level, at closings of homes, at the state level, at hotels. There's a vending machine tax in this bill. Whether it's broad, there's a higher tax on diesel fuel now, which could hurt our trucking industry. Whether it's fair, this bill excuse me. I'm so looking at that. Whether it's fair or not, and it disproportionately hurt rural Virginians. That's why there's one Democrat in the House of Delegates west of Roanoke, Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson also voted against this bill because it hurts rural Virginians. Currently, 70% of Floyd County members drive outside of their county to work, and this disproportionately hurts them.
Okay, thank you. Our next.
Can I rebut also?
Okay,
yeah.
fine. Can you? Okay. First, second rebuttal. Yes. Can you reset? Yeah.
My friend Mr. Rush said that it's an inefficient tax, which is definitely true. It's too spread out, But I would say to him that if he were truly a leader, this bill was put forth by his side of the aisle, and he could have done more to make it a better bill than it was, rather than just voting against it.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Yost.
The only thing that I would want to point out is that you criticized me for voting for the hybrid tax. Well, so did John Edwards. It was part of the transportation bill, something that you could not pull out.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question. Local municipalities suffer from income loss in property and meals taxes from Virginia Tech. What can you do? Let's see. And Mr. Harder, you get to start that one.
I think that it's something that we need to evaluate at the state level. There's I know a lot of businesses here in Blacksburg are unhappy about the fact that we have a disproportionate tax for the food that's consumed off campus and on campus. I support looking at that piece of legislation that might correct that and bring that into a better balance. And really, I think that one of the things I want to do as a legislator here in the New River Valley is be someone who opens up the lines of communication between our universities, our local governments. I think that's an important role that a state's delegate plays, and I think I would be an effective person at making sure that we bring people from our business community together with people who are at the state level and at our universities, not just on the food tax issue, but for all issues, and helping smooth out the relationships between these organizations and make sure that the lines of communication are open so that we can come to a compromise that meets all parties' needs.
Thank you. Mr. Yost.
I think it's something that's definitely worth evaluating, as we move forward. We coexist here in the New Valley with Virginia Tech and Radford University. We exist in a large part because Virginia Tech and Radford University, they are our largest employers. New River Community College, too, as well. They add a lot to our area. The economic impact of one football game or one basketball game to this area is in the millions of dollars. And so those are things to consider as we move forward in looking at these issues.
Okay.
I'm going to echo much of what you folks have said. I think in a situation in Blacksburg with Virginia Tech and in Radford with Radford University, there's always some tension, but there's always also a tremendous amount of appreciation. And I think that the sides can come together and work this out.
Okay.
I would probably disagree a little bit as the father of a current Virginia Tech student. I don't believe raising the meals tax on Virginia Tech students and their parents is the way to go. And if we look at taxes as a detriment to business, I'd love for my opponent to explain his September tax plan, where he called for productive tax rates of up to 90% on individuals and up to 55% on businesses here in Virginia. It's quite bizarre that you would call for those things. And he talked about the 1960s, and I was lucky enough, and Michael was there, where we announced a plant relocating here from Poland. You know, Poland was a communist country in the 60s. And we need to have a modern tax system that's going to move Virginia forward in the direction that we've been going economically.
Okay, thank you.
Rebuttal?
Yes?
We're done with that?
No,
Okay.
you may do a rebuttal.
What Mr. Rush is talking about, it was an argument that I made online. Wasn't actually suggesting it. I'm not sure that it could happen in this particular climate, and I'm not sure it would work well. But I certainly think that his party has shown an aversion to taxing our wealthiest citizens, considering them to be protected because they are the, quote, job creators. And as I explained earlier, we are the job creators. And that was a particularly productive period in our history. And I think that tax rates on the wealthiest of Americans would certainly be helpful in some ways and not a detriment, as he claims.
I rebut.
Okay.
I never claimed anything. I just put forth what you stated in an argument on your blog. I also have never claimed that the things that you just said. But what I do know that is the 60s, you claimed that there was the most productive of our time. The Soviet Union still existed. China hadn't even experienced a cultural revolution yet. And now they're our largest economic rival in the world. We have to have progressive forward thinking for our economic plan. That's why Virginia's been so successful. Virginia has the lowest unemployment rate in the Southeast. We are creating jobs in Virginia.
Okay, thank you. The next question brings up the whole issue of drug addiction. What programs would you initiate to address the high rates of methamphetamine addiction and deaths in Southwest Virginia? And Mr. Yost, I believe we start with you.
Absolutely. Over the last 2 years, the mental health and substance abuse issues have been a top concern and priority of mine. In my first session, I introduced a bill that would allow for the creation of drug courts in Virginia. Unfortunately, many in my party disagree with those types of therapeutic courts, but we were able to get language in the budget that allowed them to basically crop up on their own without actually getting approval from the General Assembly in their specific localities. So looking at therapeutic treatment models like that, it's so important. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've spent so much time in the Commonwealth looking at the training center issue that Delegate Rush talked about earlier, but we really need to buckle down and look at the mental health and substance abuse problem, because it is something that is strongly affecting Southwest Virginia, and locking them up and putting them in jail or prison just isn't working. We have to be putting them where they're going to be getting services, they're going to be getting treatment, because otherwise they're just going to be recycling in and out of jails and prisons.
Okay.
Yes, and to add to that, I think that in my experience, I've written several books now about Southwest Virginia and Southern West Virginia, and where we see the biggest drug problems are in the poorest areas, because people are more ensconced in a cycle of poverty, and they turn to drugs, in manufacturing of drugs, sale and distribution of drugs, and that we need to look at alleviating poverty by providing training, by providing these ladders to economic success, and educational opportunities, job opportunities, and those things will help tremendously in alleviating our drug issues.
Yeah, I actually agree with Michael on this. Jobs are the number one thing that would help keep our citizens off drugs. Southwest Virginia has been disproportionately hurt with drugs. I've had a death in my family from drugs. I work for Virginia Farm Bureau. We're divided up in agencies of agents, and we all make fairly good money. We're professionals in our industry, and out of the 12 agents we had, 9 in Southwest Virginia, 9 of my friends had personally somebody in their family die of overdose. And these are very, very sad situations. That's why in my first term, Joseph and I supported the drug courts in Montgomery County. We've talked extensively with with some of our judges about how we can help with the situation, and I will continue to focus on this. It's been personal to me, and I hopefully will be returned for another session so that I can continue to work on this.
Yeah, I think the issue is an important one, and one that has to be met with a comprehensive strategy. This is something that, first and foremost, we've got to have adequate mental health in our communities to provide services to people who need help with these types of things. But it's also about investing in our education system and making sure that people have a quality education, growing our region's jobs. And, this is a comprehensive issue that we have to look at because people need the support to overcome these types of things. I think it's something that also includes law enforcement, but I think really the Medicaid expansion is another thing that comes into play here too. We're talking about adding 400,000 new uninsured people onto our rolls to have options for benefit packages. Allowing them to have services is really an important aspect of the Medicaid program, and I think this really illustrates the power that this expansion really could be for our state.
Thank you. Our next question talks about student loans and college debt. Do you believe every high school graduate should have to endure burdensome debt from student loans in order to get a college degree or get a well-paying job? Or do you believe there are other paths to success? Mr. Abraham, we'll start with you.
Read the last sentence.
Right. Or do you believe there are other paths to success?
Well, certainly there are other paths to success. Not everyone everyone needs to come out of high school. Everyone needs a college, high school education, I think, to be an active, participating person. But not everybody needs to go to college. There are plenty of opportunities in the building trades, manufacturing trades, and various other areas where people can find gainful employment. Again, I'm going to come back to my pay it forward system that I proposed before. This is a system that is entirely focused on getting kids out of college without this crushing load of debt. And I think it's huge to unburden our children with these debt loads.
Yes. Student loan debt has been a crisis here in the United States and in Virginia. As a father of a current Virginia Tech student, I was lucky enough that my boys both got Army ROTC scholarships, and they haven't been burdened with the crushing debt. What we have to do, but I do not think every child needs to immediately go to college. I chose a different path. I chose to go into the United States Army. I'm proud of my service. My wife, who just graduated from Bluefield College later on, last year, and now she's currently enrolled in the master's program at Virginia Tech. So there are different paths we can take. The thing is, we have to make sure that the state is providing its resources for our colleges and universities, and that's something I'll continue to work on.
Okay.
Investing in our education system is the most important thing that we can do. And I would echo the things that Delegate Rush and Michael Abraham have said. It's not about just going to our universities. I was talking at the Home Builders Association meeting this past week and saying I really support making sure that our high schools have apprenticeship programs so that we can give people the skills that they need in high school. I'm a proud graduate of NRCC, as I said, and was proud to be in classes with people who were getting skills that they could use in the workforce. Me and my brother both actually took that, have degrees from New River Community College, and it was a wonderful way for us to alleviate the cost of our education. I think that making sure we have thriving community colleges, thriving universities that are accessible to people is a priority for me as a delegate, and I think this is really wrapped up in the budget priorities too. I would put education first and foremost, and making sure that our universities have the adequate resources to not only fund their infrastructure and administrative things, but making sure that they're able to give students a quality education at a cost that's affordable for all Virginians.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Yost.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely important that we ensure that students graduating from college are not going to be crushed under their debt. I still have student loans that I pay off every month. My wife does too. She's working on her second master's in history right now. There's things that we can do at the state level, targeting financial aid, financial assistance, and grants to those who need it the most. Looking at creating websites where prospective college students can go visit and look at what careers, what majors are the hot majors and topics right now, so they know that they're going to get a job when they get out of school and what the pay is going to be. Not everybody, and I'll agree with everybody else up here, not everybody else needs to go to college when they leave high school. I come from a rural area. Career and technical education is huge. In Giles and Montgomery County, we have some amazing career and technical centers, and supporting those so that when they do leave high school, if they make the decision not to go to college, they have a skill that they can go into the workforce with.
Thank you.
Beth, could I say one more thing?
Yes.
This is not actually a rebuttal, but the other thing I'd like to look at in my first legislative term is what college costs these days. When I went to school way back in the dark ages when dinosaurs still roamed the drill field, that was supposed to be funny. It worked really well the last time I used it. Tuition, I think, was about $660 a year. And my daughter just graduated from Virginia Tech. It was $9,500 a year as an in-state student. And if that continues, it's going to be unsustainable. And so we need to look at how much these colleges and universities actually charge our kids and look at ways to reduce those costs.
The next question, do you support uranium mining in Virginia? And if you do, what sort of other regulations do we?
Legislation, 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 legislation has not gotten to the full General Assembly. Has not been in a committee that I serve on. It never made it out of committee. But last year I communicated that I would not have supported the lifting of the moratorium on uranium mining because it did not reach those thresholds that I talked about safely for the environment and local communities and the financial safeguards for the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Thank you.
I would absolutely oppose any uranium mining being opened in Virginia. I think it's important that we be stewards of our environment, especially on our beautiful end of the state that we have here, and I really want to step up and be an advocate for working for our environment, and I think uranium mining would be a disastrous implications if we were to open the state up to that. We have to leave our next generation a beautiful state, and I think that not only in just the mining itself, but in terms of water runoff, it's really an important step that the state makes sure that they keep that moratorium in place, and I would be a strong advocate for doing so.
Mr. Yost.
I have not and continue to not support opening the moratorium on uranium in Virginia. There's a lot of questions, 300 and some jobs. And I said, well, how many of those jobs are actually going to be in that area? And they never could answer that question because if we're going to be creating all these jobs, they should be.
Yes, and again, unequivocally no, and I've made a very public statement about this. What we're talking about is Coles Hill, which is down in Pittsylvania County. It's the largest known uranium deposit in the world that is not being mined right now. And most uranium is mined in semi-arid and remote places, and Coles Hill is neither of those things. Whenever you mine anything, you pull out a lot of unwanted stuff to get to the wanted stuff. The problem with uranium is that there's an awful lot of unwanted stuff, 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 out of 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 unwanted stuff, because uranium, even in a high concentration, is only about 1 to 2%. So you end up with enormous mine tailings, and these things are all radioactive, mildly radioactive, and they're susceptible to a water runoff. And so I would definitely not be in favor of this, would vote against it. On that similar subject, have been very vocal in my opposition to mountaintop removal mining of coal, which I consider one of the most environmentally destructive things that we've ever come up with. And if we can't find a way to get the coal out without doing this damage, we need to stop that immediately. And if I get to the state legislature, I will work on that immediately.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, Michael said that we're talking specifically about Coles Hill. That is just the known deposit that we know of now. I mean, if we lift the moratorium, it would really be throughout the state. and there's other minerals that it could also be. That's one of the reasons why I would have to make sure that there were financial safeguards in place for the local communities in the Commonwealth of Virginia to avoid taxpayers footing the bill for any cleanup.
Thank you. The next question comes from a audience member who's obviously upset about gerrymandering. During the next census, time for census, where Virginia is going to be redistricted, should it be redistricting by a nonpartisan commission, or should the General Assembly majority party still continue to decide on the new district? And let's see, I think Mr. Harder, you get to start. Is it?
I'm not Michael, I believe. I think it's.
I'll take it. I like this one.
Okay, fine. Well,
I like this one. This is a huge issue, ladies and gentlemen, how we district, because the person who redistricts dictates what happens politically. In the United States last year, in the congressional elections, I think 1.3 million more votes were cast in America for Democrats, and yet more Republicans were elected. In the state of Virginia, we live in a solid purple state. We voted last year for a Democratic governor. Democratic president. We voted for 2 Democratic senators, U.S. senators. Statewide, we have a 50-50 split in the U.S. Senate, but in the House of Delegates, it's 2/3 Republican, and it can be traced so closely back to the guy who draws the lines. And to be fair, both sides have done this when they've had the opportunity. The tools have just gotten a lot better. And the ability to pick out neighborhood by neighborhood is done now on computers. We're in a situation right now where delegates are picking their voters and not the other way around, and that's wrong.
Mr. Rush.
I'm not for gerrymandering. I'm for democracy, and that's what I'm for. I'm for one man, one vote. And the fact is that both, as Michael said, both parties do it. We never hear complaints that there were more votes cast for Republican Senate in the U.S. Virginia Senate, more votes cast for Republicans in the Senate, and yet we have a 20-20 tie in there. Both parties have done it. If I'm still an elected official and when the next census comes, I will work to make sure that my constituents are well represented, and make sure that my district is compact so I can make sure I can get to all my constituents. And you know, right now in the Senate, Ralph Smith, he drives from Roanoke County all the way to Wythe County, and that's a gerrymandered district. And that's something that that John Edwards and those guys supported.
Okay, Mr. Hart.
Yeah, I absolutely support. It really is healthy for. 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 It really is healthy for our democracy to have close districts that are competitive, and I think there's a real opportunity that the state has to use an independent commission that would decide where our boundaries are set.
Mr. Yost.
I agree 100%. You know, I think we are where we are today because of the way we draw our lines. You look at the House of Delegates, there's 100 members in the House. There's probably only about 7 or 8 seats that are competitive across Virginia. You know, and everybody's right. Everybody's done it. Senate Democrats have done it. House Republicans have done it. Heck, Senate Republicans tried to do it this year. You know, it's something that has to be fixed if we want to move forward, you know, in this country.
Can I say something else?
Yes.
Yeah, when I'm out canvassing door to door, people are really unhappy. And this is one of the reasons. And they see what's been done to them. And it strikes me that there's a fair amount of unanimity here on the stage, and yet nobody seems to be able to fix it. Okay? And I think that we should all take it upon ourselves, not just those of us sitting up here, but all of you out there, okay, to not let this stand. This is something that is very important to our democracy, and we all need to devote ourselves to fixing it.
Okay. Our next question. Aside from reproductive rights, how would you specifically support or oppose other women's rights issues? And Mr. Rush, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Well, obviously, I support equal rights for everyone, and also in the last General Assembly session, we passed several bills. One dealing with breast cancer and breast density to make sure that our women, our women in the Commonwealth, were properly informed of mammogram results. We passed Lyme disease to make sure that tests, Lyme disease notification to make sure that if you're tested for Lyme disease, that you know that there could be false tests, false negatives in that area. And I'll continue to work for my wife and my mother who's here and my 9-year-old daughter. We're going to make sure that equal rights are there, because I believe my little girl can be president of the United States, and I want to make sure she has that opportunity.
Absolutely. I think it's really important for our state to take on and looking at women's rights in a broader sense than, unfortunately, the social agenda that we've seen in the last 2 years. I come from a strong line of powerful women. As I've mentioned earlier, my grandmother, Delegate Joan Munford, represented our community and was a strong advocate for women's issues, much broader than talking about them in a social means. My mom is a businesswoman here in the area, and my wife is someone who teaches at Virginia Tech and Radford. And I really think it's important that we have a delegate who wants to frame women's rights as an issue about talking about things like equality in pay, finding ways that we can get maternity leave for our families when they're having a child. Other states have started to take on maternity leave, and it's a real possibility for our state to look at exploring that. It's such an important bond that's created between our between our kids and our families, and I really think it's important that we start to evaluate programs like that to really take our state forward.
Mr. Yost.
I'm a son, a husband, and a father, and, I support equality across the board for women. I think there's things we absolutely can look at, whether we're looking at equal pay, whether we're looking at equal hiring practices, making sure that, our colleges are accepting women just as much as they are men. Anything that we can do to assure that there's, equality across the board, I think we're making a step in the right direction.
Okay. Mr. Abraham.
I'm going to echo much of what's said. I also come from a family of powerful women, and 2 of them are out there in the audience looking at me right now, so I better say the right thing. Again, I support equality in all areas, in pay and in hiring. In maternity decisions, I trust a woman and her doctor to make her own decisions. And I believe that we have a better country when our women are empowered. And I almost wish that I was out there in the audience and 4 women were up here debating this. I also would very much like to see a female president in my life.
Thank you.
Lily, get to work.
I have 2 questions here, asking pretty much the same thing. One, will you release your 2013 NRA survey? And the other one asking, will you release your 2013 NRA survey so we know that you are telling constituents and lobbyists the same thing? And I believe, Mr. Harder, we are starting with you.
That's a bit of an odd question for me. I didn't actually take the NRA survey this year. I don't think that their organization is representative of the types of things that we need in our state. I'm someone who believes that it's important that we protect our heritage and our heritage of guns here in this region, and I think it's an important facet of many people's lives here in this area, but I think that the emphasis on the policies that flow out of our state legislature should be emphasizing security in our communities and security in our schools. And that's something that I want to work hard as a delegate towards implementing and doing what we can to support. And so I think I'm going to be an advocate who works tirelessly to make sure that we're doing things that protect our communities, and I'm ready to do that.
Mr. Yost.
I took an oath to uphold the Constitution when I was first sworn in 2 years ago, and part of that is the Second Amendment. I was given an A- by the NRA this past year for this election. Looking at it, I told them the same thing that I've said up here today. We sponsored a bill along with Senator John Edwards and Bill Stanley and Don McEachin and one other that would have made a dent in closing the gun show loophole in Virginia. But, if you would like to have it, I would say contact them.
Okay. Mr. Graham.
I also did not fill out that survey, and I've spent a lot of time on a lot of surveys, and I filled out those surveys where I was looking for an endorsement, and frankly wasn't interested in their endorsement. I don't believe the NRA represents my views in any way. My understanding is their membership is around 4 million people out of 310 million people, and I think they have undue influence in our area. I believe that gun violence is a shameful part of our culture, and that we should all be doing everything we can to reduce gun violence in the United States. The problem that I have with the NRA is that they don't seem to be focused on any solutions whatsoever that don't imply just more and more and more and more and more and more and more guns. So I didn't fill that in. I also want to mention that I was particularly offended during the couple of festivals I've attended, these gun rights groups that are handing out stickers that say guns save lives. To me, reading something like that is saying that matches put out fire, and it's inappropriate in a town like ours that's suffering from such violence.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rush.
If the NRA would like to release my survey, I would gladly allow them to. I was A-rated. I stand by the Second Amendment rights. I believe that is a foundation of especially rural Virginians. Rural Virginians who may live 30, 45 minutes from a local police officer, who may have to defend herself. And my opponent has said that handguns serve no useful purpose outside of a pistol range, and I don't believe that to be the case. If you're living in Czech, or you're in Willis, or you're in Alum Springs, or you're in Hiawassee or Snowville, where there may not be a sheriff's deputy around. And so you may have to protect yourself, and I do believe that they serve a useful purpose, and I will continue to stand for the Second Amendment.
Okay, thank you.
We do rebuttals?
Yes, you may have a 30-second minute.
Yes, I just want to say really quickly that I don't have any problem with the Second Amendment, but I think a lot of people are sort of focused on that will not be infringed line, and they don't pay much attention to the well-regulated line. And I think that regulation of guns is not only allowed by the Second Amendment, but it is mandated by it. I'll also add that statistics have shown that you're more likely to be hurt, you or a family member, by your own gun than by not owning one at all.
Thank you. The next question, what does pro-life mean to you? Are you consistent in your views? Do you oppose the death penalty? Do you support measures that give these unplanned, unwanted children a chance for opportunities, such as Head Start, aid to families with dependent children, scholarships, and other programs? And I think, Mr. Yost, we're starting with you.
I have been very supportive of the Head Start programs in pre-K education in general. I have the joy of serving on the Smart Beginnings Neuer Valley board and on their Business Community Council. Today, for me, was actually, I guess, the day of early child. I spent about an hour earlier in the morning reading to a child that's assigned to me at Blacksburg Head Start. And then this evening, right before I came to here, I was over at the Valley Interfaith Child Care Center for their 10-year foundation celebration. And so, I think as we look forward, starting early on is the way to go. You could probably fix a lot of issues that we have in our society, whether you're talking about drug abuse, whether you're talking about going to jail. Studies have shown that investing in a child early on significantly decreases their involvement, potential involvement in the criminal justice system. You see higher reading rates, you see higher graduation rates, and so doing that is absolutely great.
Okay.
Again, the question again was about pro-life. It also had to do with death penalty.
What does pro-life mean to you? Are you consistent in your views? Do you oppose the death penalty? Do you support measures that give unplanned, unwanted children a chance?
Well, that was an awful lot of questions there wrapped together. And,
I think that, yes.
And I think Delegate Yost did a nice job with what he had to say, and won't go back through all that, but I wanted to particularly touch on the death penalty, because the death penalty has been one of the things that I have agonized over, and one of the most difficult issues for me to resolve personally. I talked to a sheriff. I've interviewed all 3 sheriffs in my district, and one of them specifically wanted to know how I felt about the death penalty. And there's nothing that I'm more conflicted about. I understand the need to rid certain people from our society. I understand the need for certain people to have closure against some of these people, but I also understand that the costs of trying someone for this and incarceration are extraordinary. I also understand that minorities have been unfairly targeted towards death penalty, and once you execute somebody, you can't bring them back. So that's my feeling on that.
Mr.
You know, as I said earlier, I'm thoughtfully pro-life. I believe the difference is an innocent child and a guilty, someone guilty of some of the most heinous crimes we've experienced as a society. So I do support the death penalty. In my first term on the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors, one of my joys was to serve on the New River Valley Community Action Board, which administers Head Start here in Virginia, or in the New River Valley. It was a pleasure to do that, working with those thoughtful educators that worked hard for some of our underserved youth. And it was a meeting I look forward to going to, and we were able to help that group, and I got a lot of insight from them, and so I definitely support Head Start, and have some experience with it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to address the aspect of the question that my opponent said regarding Head Start. I think Head Start is an important program that we have in our state, and we've got to continue to allow our students to have the opportunities that Head Start gives them and giving them an early education. But I can say that Ken Cuccinelli has already said that he's going to be cutting our budget by $1.4 billion. The first thing that he's going to be going after, if he's able to do that, is going to be our education programs, our early childhood development programs, and I'm going to be someone who steps up and makes sure that our education system, our Head Start programs stay at their current fundings, and battles Governor Cuccinelli, if he should be elected, Governor Cuccinelli's plan to cut our $1.4 billion out of our budget. I think it's really important that we not only have Head Start programs, but we continue the programs that we have that help our kids develop regularly, like health programs that make sure that they get the adequate health programs that they need, and also making sure that they have adequate nutrition in place too.
Thank you. The next question may be more fun. Do you support bringing Amtrak to Roanoke and eventually back to Christiansburg? If so, what steps will you take to implement this? And let's see, I think Mr. Abraham, you get to start.
Oh, gosh. Well, this one is everybody here. I'd be astounded if anybody says, oh, no, let's leave it down there. Nobody really wants those trains up here. For much of my adult life, I have been a proponent of alternative transportation. Those of you who know me are always surprised when they see me in a car. And I'm a big fan of bicycles, of motorcycles, of walking, and I feel the need. I've always wanted to relocalize our communities, magnetize our communities together, which is what transit and rail will do for us. I think that everyone is generally in favor of increasing passenger rail. We have a tremendous heritage in this region in rail, and I think it would be one of the best things that we could do. I'm also a big fan of these excursions, to bring the steam excursion trains, and I can't imagine that anybody who wouldn't be in favor of this. So let's bring Amtrak here. Let's bring it all the way through our district to Pulaski and eventually all the way down to Bristol, and let's make passenger trains a reality.
I would support. I support passenger rail. I would like to know the cost. I don't support a blank check for passenger rail, and I definitely I keep my eye on the budget, and I want to make sure that we're make sure our maintenance is done. We can't take away from maintenance for passenger rail. We got to make sure our roads are up to date and paved, and I would support it, but I'd have to know the cost.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harder.
I've already said earlier that it's an imperative thing that we do to get the rail to Blacksburg, and I'm going to be someone who's going to step up to do that and provide the leadership that we need to do so. It's an important thing that should have been in our transportation package. Who knows when we're next going to have an opportunity like the transportation package presented itself, and it's really a shame that we didn't get it in that package for Blacksburg. We need that rail to give an opportunity for our students to ride that between Northern Virginia and Blacksburg. It's a real opportunity for our state. I've really loved the Amtrak system and had the opportunity when I was working for Rick Boucher's office in D.C. to ride it a lot. My wife was getting her master's degree in Greensboro. The train would come in at about 3 in the morning, and we would actually ride it up, and I would be there for work in the morning. I think we've got to give that opportunity to our students coming from Northern Virginia to take our cars off of our highways and give a real opportunity for rail in our state.
You know, I've been very supportive of rail. I've already been providing the leadership to do it. We have formed a coalition here in the New River Valley made up of chambers, made up of the counties, made up of the Blacksburg Partnership, Mayor of the Department of Rail and Public Transit. We were just meeting in Blacksburg last week with Senator Edwards and myself and the Director of Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transit about what we need to do to get it to Christiansburg and Radford. It actually was in the budget. The only reason that Roanoke is getting rail at this point is because there was $60 million for public rail and public transit to bring it that far. But if we want to see rail come this far, we the people have to show that we want it. And the only way we can do that is to ride that bus to Roanoke, from Blacksburg to Roanoke or Blacksburg to Lynchburg, and show that there's a demand out there. Otherwise, DRPT will not fund bringing it up here. They just won't. It's a cost analysis for them. So we need to show that we need it.
Okay, thank you. The next question, and I think it'll be starting with Mr. Rush. Would you support state funding for HPV vaccinations for girls and boys to eliminate the human papillomavirus and cervical cancer it causes?
I would not support state funding for that, but I do not have a problem if parents choose to vaccinate their young girls for the HPV virus. I'm more than supportive of that, but I would support state funding that.
Okay. Mr. Harder.
I think it's of absolute importance that we give people the opportunity to get a vaccination for that. I think it's a disease that we know that the science is behind it, that we can control. Why would we not take the steps to eradicate that and provide the next generation of women the support they need to avoid that illness? I think, we talked earlier about supporting women's rights and supporting women's rights beyond just a discussion about pro-life or pro-choice. And I think this is an area where we've got to do it. We've got to support our women and our next generation of women with programs like this that increase the health of our state and provide our next generation a real resource.
Okay.
I think everybody should have the opportunity and access to it. I don't think it's something that's initially should be supported by the state. Some parents choose not to provide vaccines to their kids, whether it's HPV vaccine or whether it's any other type of vaccine. It should be left up to the parent.
Okay.
I believe that all of us in society have a vested interest in managing communicable diseases. And I'm a member of Rotary International, and we're active worldwide to eradicate polio. And as long as one person out there still has it, it's still a threat. And we work, the goal is to completely eliminate it from the world. And we're this close right now. So when there is a disease out there that can be spread from person to person, I think it's our duty as a society to work with everybody and get everybody vaccinated and just eradicate it, just be done with it forever. And if the science is there and it can tell us that that's the case, and that the medicines are there that can make that happen, I think we would be crazy to portion it out and only let certain people get vaccinated and the other people are still carrying.
Thank you.
Can I?
Yes, you may respond.
I would echo that and also say that I think an important distinction here between the positions that me and Michael are taking and Nick and Joseph are taking is that we could pass legislation that allowed people who wanted to opt out of the system the ability to still get the vaccination. And I think it's an important step that we take that gives health to everyone and not just to people who can afford to pay for this. It's important that we allow people who are low income to have the services that people who aren't low income have.
Thank you. We have time really only for one more question, so the one I'm going to pick is perhaps give each of you a chance to summarize what experience that you bring that perhaps makes you uniquely qualified for the job of being a delegate. And I believe that, Mr. Harder, I'm starting with you.
To me, really, it's hard to say one, because I think there are two things that really provide me the support to do this job well. First, it's the legislative experience that I've had working for Congressman Rick Boucher. Across the aisle, people have been so happy for the work that he did for our region and so sad to see him defeated here in 2010. And I really believe that my time working for him gave me familiarization with working with the legislative process, and I'm going to be someone who steps up as Rick did to work for my constituents, to work hard for passing legislation, and I really feel like I've got great experience from that can help me be a strong legislator on day one. And then two, I have a master's degree in public policy, and I'm currently finishing up my PhD in public policy and public administration, and I really feel like that experience, the comprehensive way that I look at our policy problems, is a real asset and would be an asset to our caucus and something that I really could use to help pass legislation that really does offer our state a way forward.
Thank you. Mr. Yost.
Yes, ma'am. For me, I've already got 2 years of experience under my belt as a delegate, and we've done a lot in the last 2 years. We've increased funding for mental health services. We've gotten millions of dollars for Virginia Tech. Have moved Radford's capital plan on up through the ranks so they can build the buildings they need to build. But for me, at the end of the day, it's about building a consensus, working together. Some of the folks that I cherish the most are across the aisle in Richmond. Delegate Ware, Senator Barker up in Fairfax County. We have worked really closely over the last 2 years, and those are the type of folks that we need in today's world, folks who are willing to talk to the other person regardless of what their party affiliation is. You don't have to agree with me on everything that I do. I wouldn't expect anybody to. Otherwise it would be a very dull world. But we have to have somebody who's willing to work together, I think.
Thank you.
I think my greatest strength is that I've never done this before. I'm outside watching the process just like the rest of you and decided to dive in and see if I can make a difference in this state. I think we have too many career politicians and they're in the pocket of big corporations and big business and everybody, they're beholden to everybody except the people. And I know where my allegiance lies. I'm a businessman, I'm a writer, I'm a student of culture. I've been studying this area from the view, I guess, of an academic almost. For many, many years. And I think my understanding of the people and their aspirations and their dreams and what makes this area special, what makes these people special, is something that I can carry to the legislature in Richmond and get some attention down here and get some things done that we really need to have done down here.
Thank you. I believe I have a history of service, whether it's joining the Army at age 18, not only joining the Army, but then volunteering to be a paratrooper, coming back and being married, have a young child, get a job at Federal Express, stepping up to the plate and running for Montgomery County Board of Supervisors at age 23. If you ever get on Jeopardy and they ask who's the youngest elected official in the history of Montgomery County, Virginia, the answer is Nick Rush. And in my 12 years that I served on the Board of Supervisors, many of those years serving in leadership capacities, whether it be vice chair or as when I left as chairman of the Board of Supervisors. And then when I left, I was bipartisanly asked to serve on the New River Valley Economic Development Alliance. That's the chief job creator for the New River Valley. I was appointed to serve on that board by both Democrats and Republicans because of my reputation of working hard for the citizens of Montgomery County and now the New River Valley.
Thank you. And now it's past 8:20, and we're going to, each of the candidates is going to have 2 minutes to summarize and perhaps convince you why they are the delegate you would like to vote for. And I think since Mr. Yost, it was going to be that what we will do is simply let you start, and then we will just go back this way. So it'll be Mr. Yost, Mr. Harder, Mr. Rush, and then Mr. Abraham. So when you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank Elizabeth Obenshane and the League of Women's Voters here in the Valley, or Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, the News Messenger, for hosting us tonight. And I want to thank all of y'all for coming out. This is an important part of our process as we exchange ideas. I was elected in 2011, and in my estimation, feel like I've done a good job representing not just one part of my district, but every part of my district. And that's important in this district. It's a very wide and varied area. And it's important that we have somebody who is going to work across the aisle and work with everybody in general. I'm a consensus builder. I have made that sort of my key thing. I have gone rogue on occasion, much to the chagrin of members of my party. And it's interesting, and I will close with this before I ask for your vote on November 5th. As I look back over the last couple months of the campaign since, I guess, James announced back in May, looked at the mailers, looked at what he said, I could only find really about 5 things that he's criticized me on, 5 votes, one of them which being the transportation bill, which I've found interesting considering his gubernatorial candidate is running on the fact that he helped pass that transportation bill. But 5 things over the last 2 years. Well, in that time, just on the House floor, we've cast 2,121 votes. If you do the math, that's 0.002% of the time that I've spent in Richmond that he has a criticism of. And I think that's important to consider as we leave here. And so I want to thank all of y'all for coming out again. It's been a pleasure, and I hope to have your support on November 5th.
I too would like to thank the League of Women Voters and our hosts here tonight. This has been a great opportunity to talk about our issues that are relating to our district's races. I'd like to thank Beth for putting this together too, and having keeping us together and on message here throughout the night. And I'll give you another number related to my opponent, who says that he's a consensus builder and a rogue. He's sided with the Speaker 95% of the votes that he's taken. He paints himself off as being someone who is working for the middle and someone who is working across the aisle. But the real fact of the matter is that he is someone who sides with the Speaker's office 95% of the time. If you send me to the legislature, I'm going to be someone who's going to work tirelessly for things like education and for our environment. When I got into this race back in May, one of the first things that I did when I started thinking about the messages that I wanted to convey to our community and the things that I wanted to do for it was, how can I leave this a better place? I looked to my son and the next generation that's coming forward, and that's why I chose to emphasize growing our local economy, doing things to support our local businesses, doing things to support our education system, like raising our teacher salaries to national average and raising them $6,000. Also finding ways that we can think creatively about schools, like getting rid of SOLs. And then lastly, I'm a supporter of the environment. I think we have a beautiful end of the state that we have to do things that take us forward with that beauty for our next generation. And I'm someone that's going to stand up for conservation and stand up for environmental issues in the legislature. And I look forward to earning your vote.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the forum, Elizabeth, for moderating. You've done an excellent job. Thank you guys for coming out. Also want to thank my opponent, Michael, for stepping up and running and sharing his ideas with the community. I know what kind of time commitment it is, and I appreciate your efforts. Now a little about myself. I'm Nick Rush. I'm son of a union pipe fitter and a public school teacher. I was born and raised in the New River Valley. After graduating from Christiansburg High School, I volunteered to serve in the United States Army, where I served as a paratrooper in 82nd Airborne Division. At the age of 23, I was elected to the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors. You know, after 12 years on the board, I decided not to run for re-election. I decided to focus on my family. I'm married. I have 3 children. My wife, Jennifer, works at Virginia Tech. She is also in the master's program, as I mentioned earlier. My oldest son, Cody, he's also a VT grad. He's a first lieutenant in the United States Army. He's a scout platoon leader in the 1st Armored Cav Division. My youngest son, who's here tonight, thank you for coming, Forrest. He's the 1st Battalion Commander. He's a senior at Virginia Tech. He's 1st Battalion Commander in the Army ROTC at Virginia Tech. My daughter, Lily, she is, as Jennifer said, say she's 9 years old because she likes to say that. She's really 8. But her birthday is next month. She's a 4th grader at Pathway Christian Academy. In the end, I think this campaign comes down to a resume versus rhetoric. I encourage the voters to look at my accomplishments while I was on the Board of Supervisors. In my 2 years on the New River Valley Economic Development Alliance and my first term in the House of Delegates. I also encourage my opponents to I also encourage the voters to read my opponents' ideals. Taxpayer funding for campaigns, individual tax rates up to 90%, confiscation of personal firearms. I will not be a cheerleader for the Republican Party. I've stood against some things that the governor would like. I certainly will not be a cheerleader for the Democratic Party, but I will be a tireless worker for the citizens of the New River Valley. That is why I humbly ask you for your support on November 5th.
Again, I would like to thank everyone involved tonight, Beth and the League and everyone here. I especially want to thank Nick for being a credible and respectful opponent, because democracy is served when races are contested. Nick won last time without an opponent, and I sure felt like he needed one. I'm doing this because I think I can do a better job, and I think that'll be up to the voters. I'm a businessman, a writer, a father, and a husband, and I'm just tired of watching the partisan bickering in Richmond and the punitive, regressive, and mean-spirited legislation that squabbling produces. I have professional experience in engineering, sales, management, marketing, and writing. I believe that my local roots, my business background, extensive experience into the history and culture of this region, and my life experiences make me uniquely qualified to govern at the state level. I'm a good listener, I'm empathic and respectful, I'm firm in my convictions, and yet I'm always open to better ideas. I'm an active communicator, and constituents will always know where I stand. Go to Google. I'll bring partnership and conciliation rather than rancor to the General Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, mine is a forward-looking, prosperity-based, innovation and solution-driven agenda. It's grounded in facts and logic, and it's focused on giving all of our citizens better opportunities for success and for lasting prosperity. I'll work to grow the middle class, invest in our schools, roads, bridges, and create jobs. I'll work for a safe and clean environment, access to better health care, and recreational opportunities. My opponent is more of a follower than a leader. He's not sponsored any significant legislation during his tenure, even as his party was in the majority. He votes his party line most of the time. I'm an independent thinking moderate, free from ideology, and bound to the citizens. His campaign and mine are very different. His is funded by PACs and associations and special interest groups, and mine is funded by you. It's a true grassroots effort. If the voters elect me on November 5th, I'll go to Richmond, and I will govern with heart, humility, and humor, and never forget who sent me there to represent the people of the 7th District and the state of Virginia, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you. I think we should all give them a round of applause. And our thanks to you for coming out tonight and being a great audience and questioner. Thank you. Good night.